what's checking, everybody? Welcome to a Monday edition of the Orange Bloods Recruiting Hour, the final Monday edition of the Recruiting Hour in the month of February. We'll be into the month of March very soon. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That is Chad Hastings. Welcome, everybody, into the Specs chat. Enter at your own risk. And if you want to send us a $100 super chat to get your question to the front of the line, hey, it worked really well earlier today. Might as well, keep on riding that train if at all possible. What up, Blake? Afternoon, gentlemen. Guys, do us a solid. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Get notifications. All of those things absolutely help the channel every time you choose to do so. We're talking. So over the weekend, Chad, I was doing some number crunching. The conversation of defensive tackles on the Texas roster came up. And so I started going through my defensive tackle charts, and it occurred to me that there just have not, we give Bo Davis a lot of grief about not recruiting defensive tackles real well when he was at Texas, that it's the position more than any other that the Longhorns have had a hard time attracting talent for. And so I started just looking up some of my historical numbers over the weekend, and it just dawned on me. It was like, holy crap, these dudes just don't grow on trees in the state of Texas anymore. That there used to be years, and look, the state of Texas in 2025 is better than a lot of the other years that we've had recently. But if you go all the way back to 2017, the year that Marvin Wilson was a five-star defensive tackle, sorry, I'm just, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to turn the distracting TV off.
Is there a soccer game you were paying attention to?
Well, it's over, but sometimes just flashing lights distract you. Okay. Since 2017, there's only been one super blue chip defensive tackle prospect in the state of Texas. One. And that's a guy in David Hicks that Texas A&M signed a year ago. Beyond that, 2017 is it. You can go back to 2016 when Ed Oliver was a prospect. You can go back to 2015 when Dalen Mack was a prospect. The Longhorns' last interior defensive line prospect that they signed was Malcolm Brown back in 2013 or 2012. It's been a while.
Been a little bit.
And the fact that there's only been one in the last 7 recruiting classes is a big part of why the Longhorns haven't been raking in the super blue chip defensive tackles. They've got to go outside the state of Texas because they haven't been inside the state of Texas. And those dudes are worth their weight in gold no matter where they are. So if there's one in Louisiana or Alabama or wherever, that guy becomes as important of a prospect outside of the quarterback conversation in any state, in any conference, for every school in the country. But there is a super blue chip defensive tackle in the 2025 recruiting class at this point. And you can make a case that he's the number one most important prospect that the Longhorns are recruiting, just because positional scarcity is a bitch when it comes to interior defensive linemen in the state of Texas.
Mm-hmm. Well, Catch, one of the things over the years I can remember, obviously trying to get 5 guys to work together is such a challenge at the offensive line, but there's never been a position throughout all the years of covering college football, I've never heard coaches talk about one that's harder to find than a badass defensive tackle. So when you laid that out in your 10 thoughts from the weekend, it made sense to me. You put that note out over the weekend. That made sense. And then I thought, okay, well, let me go take a look at this guy. Like, how special a guy are we? And then it was one of those 2 or 3 highlights in. I went, oh, I see. Okay, that doesn't grow on trees in the world of high school football. There's just no way. So
no, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. So, guys, you think you and I have never done a show together before? So the name in question is Belleville defensive tackle DJ Sanders. 6'3", 290, a high 4-star ranking in the last Rivals recruiting class. Number 7 in the state. They're updating Rivals as their rankings this week. Didn't make the 5-star list. As a matter of fact, we'll go over the new 5 stars in a moment. If you missed House Divided earlier today, there is a new 5-star from the state of Texas. It might not be a name that you were expecting, but DJ Sanders is the number 3 defensive tackle in the country. And I mentioned that there are other defensive tackles in the state of Texas this year that are worth getting excited about. Zion Williams is a defensive tackle from Lufkin, 6'4", 300 pounds. There are other 4-star defensive tackles this year in the state of Texas, but I'll be honest. I don't think Zion Williams, there's Xavier Akpunu, and I may be saying that last name incorrect. You guys know me by now. There's Dijon Battle out of Mansfield, Timberville. And there are guys that are pretty good defensive tackle prospects. All those names I mentioned inside the best 30 defensive tackles in the country. For my money, when I evaluated film on this class last, DJ Sanders was just a cut above everybody. I didn't think anybody belonged in the same sentence as him, and that could change. Guys can improve, but based on my early evaluations of the position and the current rankings that everybody has, Sanders is just a different guy. And the Longhorns haven't been able to get him on campus in a while. Nobody really got him on. His recruitment, Chad, is a bit of a mystery because he just hasn't been very active on the recruiting scene. When guys were taking trips back in January, DJ Sanders wasn't really among those guys doing so. My dog is letting you know that really hurt her feelings.
That's dogs are hard to find. This kind of defensive lineman, hard to find.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Lizzie's letting us know. So at the end of the day, I don't know that Texas fans are ready to embrace the fact that they need to go get DJ Sanders one way or the other, that they don't need to be conceding anybody of this magnitude at this position to anybody this early on, because I think you could make a case whether he's leaning to Texas or not. There may not be a more valuable prospect in the state of Texas this year than DJ Sanders, simply because he's the best. He's one of only 2 guys in the last 8 years that you would talk about in this kind of breadth.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of, before we dig into watching a little bit of this film, Catch, when we see the future cast here that says A&M and next to it, there's a fan future cast for Texas. Right now, the future cast that you put in your 10 thoughts for the weekend, where do you have DJ Sanders?
I mean, I'm projecting him to Texas A&M at this point. Let me read you something that was written by our guy Adam Gorney at Rivals.com.
Okay.
Because this kind of caught me off guard a little bit. Quote, everything is pointing to Texas A&M and Sanders' recruitment. Texas is also a contender, but the overwhelming feeling is that the Aggies have all but locked up the 4-star defensive lineman from Belleville, Texas, just an hour down the road from College Station. Sanders has kept unusually quiet about his recruitment, but the Aggies look way stronger than any other team, and a commitment to Coach Mike Elko and his staff at any time would not be a surprise. Can I be honest?
Sure.
I would be shocked. Because DJ Sanders, I mean, to me, he hasn't done enough in his recruitment. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with Gorney. Maybe he talked to the kid. Here's what I know. I don't see any updates on the Rivals Network in the past month, 2 months, where Rivals appears to have directly spoken to DJ Sanders. So I have to believe that Gorney got this information from a college coaching connection.
Okay.
If I see him doing a story on Jordan Davison, I'm like, oh, well, there's a good chance that Adam spoke with Jordan Davison. But DJ Sanders hasn't been doing interviews. When he says he's unusually quiet, that's code for ain't nobody talked to that dude in a long time.
So, Catch, when you're
go ahead.
So when you're saying shocked, you're saying you'd be shocked if he does end up at A&M, or you'd be shocked if he goes anywhere other than A&M?
I would be shocked if he made a quick decision.
Okay.
Because from my perspective, his recruitment hasn't really started. He hasn't taken a bunch of visits. He hasn't done the camp circuit. You know,
let's take a
look.
It
would just be a surprise to me if that guy committed to Texas A&M and just shut it down and didn't take any visits and didn't explore anything else, because that's not, that's a bit unusual. It's one thing to say, I think a guy's it looks all like, and I don't know that I agree with that. I think the last time Texas had him on campus was in March.
Yeah, I see one visit. That's the only visit listed here.
That's the only visit in the Rivals database.
Yep.
He doesn't even have any visits to A&M listed in the database, although he could have gone to A&M. I don't trust our A&M guys to always put in the visits of guys when they go to A&M. But he didn't visit A&M in January that I'm aware of. He didn't visit Texas. He didn't visit Oklahoma. I just think that this is a guy that things are just getting started. And I had somebody, one of my really good posters on Orange Bloods earlier today was saying, from what he could tell, there was speculation that Texas was backing off DJ Sanders. And that's like some of the dumbest shit I've ever heard. And I don't mean that coming from the poster. I mean, wherever he heard that from, the idea that you would just back off, that doesn't sound like Steve Sarkisian at all.
Right.
He likes it when they commit elsewhere. He can chase them down and bird dog them. And every year he does a really good job of flipping guys from one school to another. This guy just has been so far off the grid that I don't think anybody really has a great feel for where he goes. And look, if tomorrow that kid commits to Texas A&M, I'm prepared for all of the egg that will be on my face. But that kid doesn't even have a relationship with Mike Elko. I don't know that he's been on the A&M campus since Mike Elko took the job. So do we really expect that that young man is going to go to Texas A&M and commit on the spot at any day now with a coach that he hasn't even made a visit with to check on? So I don't know. I think that there's a lot of guessing right now on a guy who's rated as a top 30, top 35 guy in the state, in the country. But I think my hunch has been that this young man will take his time, take some visits, and while A&M might be the betting favorite right now, I think there's a long way to go. And as I talked about earlier today, last year I did 10 future casts this exact weekend a year ago. And I put in 10 future casts, and nobody at the time really argued with any of the future casts that I made. They all made sense. They all went to, at the time, what was thought to be the betting favorites. And in reality, half of those just didn't shake out. There was, you had Colin Simmons, everybody thought was going to LSU, ends up going to Texas. And not only does he end up going to Texas, they didn't even sweat it at the end. He didn't make trips to LSU that were expected. None of that stuff happened. Micah Hudson, this time a year ago, Texas was the betting favorite. There were guys a year ago that Texas was the betting favorite on that 2 months later they weren't even recruiting. Jakyle Baker, a good example of that, a kid that ends up signing with TCU that looked like one of the top 2 or 3 best receivers in the state of Texas. He didn't really take recruiting seriously. Matter of fact, if there's any guy in the state of Texas right now that I would compare this young defensive tackle to, DJ Sanders, it might be the wide receiver Jakyle Baker from a year ago. What do they have in common? Baker just wasn't doing anything recruiting related, wasn't taking visits, didn't seem to be taking it seriously. And in the end, he was more of a regional prospect than a national prospect, even though his testing numbers would indicate there weren't many guys in the state that were more physically dynamic than him. But if the guy's never going to visit your school, if the guy doesn't seem to care about recruiting, what are you going to do? Texas moved on. I don't think you can do that with a defensive tackle. If this kid doesn't want to start being recruited until December, you got to do what you got to do. You got to hang in there.
What so, I was about to say, when you talk about taking his time, are you thinking that hit that June period with some visits and then it's in that Colin Simmons territory of decide in August? Or do you think it goes even past that between August and signing day?
Who the hell knows? I can't say that I've got a good feel for it. I just don't have a feel that he's about to commit. Right. It would be very unusual for a guy to be seemingly completely disengaged with the recruiting process, to then snap his fingers and commit to a school that just changed coaches, that he doesn't have much of a relationship with, when the rest of the country is knocking down your door and wants to have a conversation with you. I mean, I guess that could happen, but that just doesn't feel like what I would expect. It's not the going to Texas A&M thing, Chad, that would be a surprise. It's that this guy's like, right now, DJ Sanders is like he's like the groundhog. He comes out like once a year, looks at his shadow, and either goes back into the cave or it would appear that last year he saw his shadow and went back into the groundhog cave for a whole year and hasn't come back out.
Punxsutawney Sanders, is what you're saying?
A little bit.
Yeah, okay.
A little bit. We're all waiting for him to come out, not see his shadow, and chill and hang out for a little while. And look, that young man can do this. The good news for him is this. When you're a total badass at a position of extreme need for almost every school in the country, you can pretty much do whatever you want to. Yeah. You can decide on signing day. You can decide after signing day. Technically, if DJ Sanders doesn't want to be recruited until after signing day, A, he could do that if he wanted to, and B, he's so good he doesn't have to sign a national letter of intent. Every school in the country would tell him, hey, man, if you want to just show up, you're ready.
He can do it at the spring game. You know what I mean? Who knows?
This kid's got options. And committing right away is a waste of his options. So we'll see. Like, what you would say about him is that for those of you who are like, these kids are too consumed on their rankings, they're too consumed on NIL, they're too consumed on, going across the country on a barnstorming tour. And, we talked about Andrew Marsh earlier. That kid's visited Texas 9 times. I think he's visited A&M 7 times, 16 times between 2 schools. And I don't know that Sanders has been anywhere other than that one visit. So I think he's incredibly valuable. I think at this point, he's actually way more mysterious than Adam Gorney or even myself can completely put a fingerprint on or a thumb on, because we haven't heard enough from this guy to know what his plan is going to be. But he can do just about anything he wants to. We've got some film of the guy. Let's show some of the film, Chad, so everybody gets an idea of what we're talking about when we talk about this young man.
Our guy says, JD said his film stands out for sure. It definitely does. One of the interesting words that you just used, Catch, in your comparison or your analogy there, when you mentioned Groundhog Day, I think that's appropriate because the ground definitely comes into play in what everybody is about to see. He likes to deal with the ground and putting people there. So let's go ahead and take a look here. Let's get it nice and big screen for the people. You're looking for big 99, or occasionally there's a like maybe a scrimmage kind of thing where he might be wearing 48, but mainly it's 99. So we'll just run it here, Catch, and let people watch. Big 99, just mauling folks.
I mean, he's a big man that can move. And those guys, 300, Anwar always talks about the conversation that he had with John Gruden, where there just aren't that many 300-pound athletic guys walking the face of the earth.
Yeah.
And this is a guy that absolutely has a chance to play on Sundays down the road if he just stays with it and doesn't get hurt, can keep his head above water with regards to distractions and all of that. But he's an insanely talented young guy. And yeah, I mean, he's a guy they line up in high school all over the field, and he makes plays all over the field. And obviously he'd be an interior guy at the next level, not a guy that you're necessarily going to see standing up in a pass rush position off the edge like he sometimes does here at the high school level.
Real quick, Catch. Translate that for me and the folks that aren't as into, as deep into this. So basically every highlight we're going to see here, he's essentially at a DN position in a 3 or 4, lineup here. But you're saying that it is the size that has everyone agreeing, even the kid, that he'll be a D tackle moving forward.
Oh, yeah. And he's playing a little bit of 5 tech in some of these, mostly playing outside on the defensive line, not a lot of interior stuff. I'm sure at the level that he's playing at right now, that's designed to create more one-on-one blocks. He's going to do a better job of pad level. These things that you see with young kids, you can turn the tape off now. These things with young guys of his size, they're not unusual. It's not unusual that a guy like that will need to be coached up a little bit. Shocker. He's not ready-made for the NFL. He'll need to improve his pad level. He'll need to continue to work on his strength. But the core package that's there is stuff that you can't be taught. And I want to go back to the numbers that I mentioned earlier today. We talk about what is this guy's value? Well, he's not quite rated as a 5-star, but of the 5-star defensive linemen in the history of the state of Texas, 75% of them have been drafted. Almost 90% of them have played in the NFL. When you go down to the current tier that he's ranked at in that high 4-star range, historically in the state of Texas, the numbers there haven't been that many, quite honestly, but almost, I think 33% have been drafted, 40% have played in the NFL. If you merge the 5 stars and the high 4 stars together and you start talking about the top 15 to 20 or so in the history of the state of Texas, you're talking about a success rate in the 60s and 70%. When you start dropping down, I did the mid 4 stars, one tier below, guys that will be ranked in the national top 100. 10% in the history of the state of Texas. The only guy that it's ever happened with is Keandre Coburn.
Wow.
He's the only guy ever in the state of Texas ever ranked as a mid 4-star defensive tackle that has completed their eligibility and ended up being drafted. 1 out of 10. When you look at high 3 stars or low 4 stars, it's a little better than 10%, but not better than 15%. So no matter how you look at it, this guy is either 2 or 3 or 4 times more likely to end up being a drafted NFL player or a guy that plays at the next level than almost any of his peers that you'll talk about from the state of Texas this year. It doesn't mean that he's automatically going to be better. It doesn't mean that there's not some kid somewhere that nobody's ever heard of that might not develop into a prospect that becomes the best prospect. But the historical value of this kid makes him on paper 3 or 4 times more likely to achieve major success than any of the other guys we'll talk about from the state of Texas this year.
That is wild. That's how important. That's why we're talking about the importance of this commit. Catch, we got a couple of good questions on the chat. I wanted to ask you something first, though. In watching this film, by the way, I would encourage Texas fans, go watch that film. It is wild. Like, he's got a couple of Reggie White throwing Chris Carter into Warren Moon moments. There are a couple of incomplete passes in there because a running back has been thrown at the quarterback by DJ Sanders. Catch, one thing I was thinking as I'm watching it, how much of the Belleville part of it would you put in there? For us older guys, that's 4A Division II, so old school would have been 3A, not the highest level, two steps from the lowest level of 11-man ball. Is there any ingredient to that for you in watching these highlights and trying to figure it out? Or would you just tell folks, no, that's just what one of these high 4-star blue chip D tackles against, mortals looks like?
I think the lower classification. Look, we had this conversation with Terry Bussey, right? Like, if you're a baller, sometimes it doesn't matter where you come from. But hey, it was a question about Terry Bussey. It still will be, even though he tore it up at the All-America games. Everybody will want to see, what does it look like when a guy from a really low level of classification makes that big of a leap? I think what it may mean for a guy like this is that he needs a season of development. Whereas a lot of times when you talk about a super blue chip defensive tackle player, Franco, but you know what? Rod Wright came in, and you start thinking about players that Texas have signed of this ilk historically. Very few of them hit the ground running right away. Malcolm Brown took it coming out of Brenham, which is probably, even though it was a decade ago, it's probably the same level of classification-ish. Brenham is 4A, at least when Malcolm Brown was playing there, or 3A. Yeah. I don't know. I can't remember if they've moved up or not, but it's not 6A, it's not 5A, if I'm not mistaken. And it certainly wasn't when Malcolm Brown was playing there. It takes a year of adjustment sometimes. A guy like that needs more coaching, a good strength program, and 12 months after you've got him, you can turn him loose. And all of the things that need to be fine-tuned a little bit can be fine-tuned. But he's really big, he's really athletic, and he knows how to play football. And those guys do not grow on trees. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here when Bo Davis was coach last year asking Bo, where are your recruits? If you think about it, a year ago, Alex Norman, the kid out of Duncanville, was the only defensive tackle in the state that Texas offered a year ago. They landed him, but he was viewed as a high 3-star. But even though his recruiting ranking wasn't that high, he was viewed as incredibly valuable because there was nobody else like him. This year, you got a guy rated much higher. The historical likelihood that he becomes a great player is much higher, because the thing about being a high 4-star or a 5-star, it increases the likelihood that you'll be a day 1 or day 2 pick in the NFL draft considerably, more times than not. And if I'm not mistaken, 3 of the last 4 5-star defensive linemen from the state of Texas, defensive tackles. Matter of fact, let me look it up real quick. I'm pretty sure, not including DJ Hicks, right? Because he's literally just finished his freshman season at Texas A&M. But let me go back and look at the numbers, because if I'm not mistaken, the stat is bonkers. I'm pulling it up right now.
Okay.
3 of the last 5 defensive tackles from the state of Texas since 2005, first-round draft picks.
So 3 of the last 5, like you said, 5 stars or 3? What level?
Since 2005.
Okay.
There have been 5 5-star defensive tackles from the state of Texas in essentially the last 20 years. On the average, we see one about once every 4 years.
Wow.
Of those players, 3 were drafted in the first round and another went in the second round.
Oof.
Let me give you the names, okay?
Serious percentage. Go ahead.
The first rounders: Malcolm Brown.
Yep.
Ashawn Robinson.
he was decent. Yeah.
Ed Oliver.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Then Mario Edwards went to Florida State in 2012, and he was a second-round pick.
Man. Okay.
Only Marvin Wilson from 2017 who also signed with Florida State, didn't get drafted in either the first or the second round. But if I'm not mistaken, he has played in the NFL.
Okay.
Which, there's only one 5-star defensive tackle in the history of the state of Texas that has ever not played in the NFL, not including David Hicks Jr. Although, Chad, if you want to know why David Hicks Jr. was ranked so high and was viewed so valuable, it's numbers like these.
Sure.
Only OU's DeMarcus Granger from the class of 2005 was a 5-star defensive tackle that never played on Sundays.
Yeah. And that was some unrealized things. There was a lot that didn't happen, I think, with that story. I think he got in trouble at a mall once and got suspended from the program, and his wasn't a talent issue. No. I think the thought was he was easily going to add to that list. But yeah, even with that, that's an incredible number. That's an incredible number.
By the way, there are no current high 4-star defensive tackles playing college football right now from the state of Texas. This is how rare these young guys are, of his pedigree, size, all of it. Since 2009, we're in the class of 2025.
Damn.
Since 2009, there's only been one. You want to take a gander at who that was?
So since 2009, there's only been one high 4-star defensive tackle from Texas.
Technically, it would be 2010 because there was one in 2009. So starting in the class of 2010, there's been one. We're in the class of 2025. You will know him. He played at Texas A&M.
Daylon Mack.
You got it.
Wow.
So if we're counting super blue chip defensive linemen, and that was 2015. So again, since 2017, there's been one 5-star combined with 0 high 4-stars. That's it.
Yeah. And by the way, I remember watching him play, and there were moments where you went, oh yeah, okay. That's just, they don't just make them like that every single day. He didn't have enough of those moments.
Yeah.
But you could see it in flashes.
So, look, the scarcity is why I think Sanders is so valuable. I don't think he's the best prospect in the state of Texas. I just think he's the best prospect in the state of Texas at a position that we never really see big-time guys come out of. And when you do, you got to get them. If you're Texas, by any means necessary, you got to break those walls down, kidnap him out of Belleville if you have to get him on your campus. Simple as that.
So, Catch, we have some good chats here before we wrap up. Somebody says, speaking of Belleville, Jeff says, we do know Sark visited Sanders at Belleville via the Sark copter.
Yes.
Did that happen? We landed in Belleville?
Everybody's been to Belleville. They're trying to get that kid's attention. Yes.
There you go. Somebody wants to know your comp. I don't know if I've heard you say that one today. Anybody that he reminds you of when you watch the full film and whatever you've seen?
Oh, gosh. I think he's got some Daylon Mack in him. I think he's got some – maybe he's got a little – I wouldn't – the thing is, most of these guys are a little taller than him. I wouldn't put him in the – I'm looking at 5 stars, and he's not a 5-star in my opinion.
Okay.
He's 6'3", he's 300. I'd like him a little bigger if I was going to put him in that kind of a classification.
Okay.
Nobody jumps to mind. He's got a little Keandre Coburn in him.
That's not bad.
But I think he's a little bit more athletic. He's a grade above that as a prospect. But there's not a guy that I can think of from the state of that played at Texas that I think is an apple for apple. Yeah,
a little more twitchy than Coburn, but And
if I were to say a guy like I had Roy Miller ranked as a 5-star. Now Rivals didn't, but Roy Miller's like one of the only high 4-stars from the Rivals era that's ever gone to the NFL. He's got a little bit of that. little bit of Roy Miller, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's fair. One more quick chat here. Someone wanted to know, I believe this would be technically a Kenny Baker question. Do we know if the new D tackle coach has been in communication with him? We'll make that the D line coach. I'm assuming Money B is asking about Kenny Baker. In addition to Sark Copter, do we know was Baker in the copter? Do we know anything about that?
I mean, Kenny Baker needs to give up a kidney if he needs to make that communication happen.
Okay.
Now, if it's been slow going, I'm going to assume that communication has taken place because I have to believe that Kenny Baker's also been to Belleville. The question would be, how good is that relationship? Well, Kenny Baker just got hired, and this kid doesn't go out of his way to meet with anybody. So is the relationship great? No, not yet. That's part of what Kenny Baker has to do. Kenny Baker has to emerge. And look, maybe the good news in this is that if you're fighting against A&M, well, they're starting from scratch in that recruitment. If you're looking at Oklahoma, it doesn't look like he's really visited there. I guess what I'm saying is, if you're Kenny Baker, you're not going to walk into a better situation where other teams have the high ground on you. Yeah. You're showing up later than most of the people that are recruiting him, but most of the people that are recruiting him haven't been able to get him on campus, haven't had one-on-one time with him, wouldn't really have a significant advantage in this recruitment at this point.
Yeah, because to be fair, Catch, I haven't heard any connections other than geography. Have you heard any specific connection to A&M? Like earlier when we were talking about the Marsh kid at receiver, he's got a family member at A&M. There's a connection there. Other than geography, have you heard any reason that would lead you to lean towards A&M specifically?
No, not really.
Okay. Yeah,
I have small town guys oftentimes like College Station more than they like the big city. But I'm telling you, this kid's been so far off the grid. I don't know who would have ascertained that information from a reporting standpoint. I haven't seen it. I don't even know that I've seen it from other networks. If going outside of the Rivals network, he just hasn't been engaged. You might say he's been even slightly aloof to a certain extent to the recruiting process. At some point that will change though. And if you're Texas, you just got to be on him like a junkyard dog.
Yeah, I guess it would be the only argument you could make just football-wise would be you're talking about a defensive-minded head coach versus the offensive-minded head coach in terms of, expertise. But other than that, I haven't heard anything that would.
Yeah, but if you're Texas, you're saying, we're talking about the difference between a program that just played in the playoff versus one that just fired their coach because they couldn't sniff the playoff.
No doubt. Absolutely. Yeah,
so,
that's a good point.
I think both of these are going to be guys. And the other thing about Sanders, Belleville went to the state championship game last year.
Oh, wow.
They played in Jerry World.
Okay.
So while a lot of guys were taking visits, he was a guy that was really focused on his high school season. And I think that's one of the reasons why he wasn't taking visits during the season, those types of things, because he was focused on football. I think everybody can respect that. I'm looking at video of him right now that one of our Rivals guys had from Jerry World. I mean, he looks like $1 million at like 16, 17 years old. You just don't grow them like that. I tell you what you don't have to worry about is that right now he actually looks taller than 6'2", 6'3" in the video that I'm looking at, but he's not like a fat guy. He's a big guy.
God, no, absolutely. He's huge, Catch. And he makes me think over and over again, whichever side of the line he's on, all I keep thinking is, that's your right tackle? That's your left tackle? Like, he makes these offensive linemen he's engaging with look so small. I know now sometimes it's a running back that, God help him, is being asked to help and chip on DJ Sanders. But a lot of times that is legitimately the other team's offensive lineman that he's just making look like a child.
About the best thing you can do is go on here and look at pictures that people took of him last year at games. But you're not going to find – he was posting where he was getting his offers from last year occasionally, but he's just not a guy that was taking visits. And so I'm telling you, this guy's not telling anybody where he's going. And nobody's promoting, hey, we talked to DJ Sanders. We've got an exclusive interview. He's really been mostly off the grid. And I think that probably makes some people nervous, because if he's not telling you where he's going, then it doesn't feel like he's going where you want him to go. So I don't know how anybody could be super confident. I think there's some generalizations being made. I think people think they have an idea of what he might do, but I'm looking at it right now just to see if I've missed anything. And boy, there's a good looking picture of him where the Florida coach came in and visited him in January. Other than the occasional picture of him being at school or him being at a game last year, there's just nothing of him on a college campus anywhere.
Interesting.
And Sarkisian did visit him, I think, the day before the junior day. I think he came in either the Thursday or the Friday before. So either the 18th or 19th of January.
Okay.
Beyond that, that's about as much as they've seen him. So, it'll be interesting to see kind of where this recruitment goes from here. But I think he's a guy that everybody across the country is going to have a very significant interest in.
There you go. That's why the title of this show is 2025's most important recruit. Yes, Ketch would tell you there's a really good argument for that, and he just laid it out for you. Go check out those highlights if you have not been over to orangebloods.com lately, or if you have not committed yourself to orangebloods.com. Now's your time. Hit that QR code. You can go see that video. You can go see any video you want of these incredible athletes. You can look at lists. You can look at commitment lists. You can check out all the great articles. You can also check out the craziest message board on the face of the earth at orangebloods.com. Go check it out. DJ Sanders, put the name in your mind, Longhorn fans or Aggie fans or whoever you love, because if whoever you love wants to be badass, this kid needs to be a part of the conversation.
Ditto.
All right, Catch. Anything else?
No, we got some other things that we can talk about tomorrow on House Divided later in the week on the recruiting hour. I'm good for right now.
All right, real quick before we get out of here, let's have Lisa tell you about everything they've got over at Specs. They bring you the chat on each and every show here with Orange Bloods Live.
No matter what you're needing, Specs same-day delivery can save the day with our Specs app or online shopping. From world-class wines to hard-to-find spirits and craft beers to gourmet foods, delicious snacks, and spectacular sweets. It's Specs. Cheers to savings.
All I know is I saw about 20 kids in Belleville's district on them videos. They wanted to drink. I don't know if they did. I'm just saying they wanted to drink, having to block DJ Sanders all night. Good grief. All right, there it is. It's your recruiting hour. We do it Mondays and Wednesdays at 4 o'clock. Check it out. Like, subscribe, get your notifications to Orange Bloods Live. We appreciate all that support. No outsider show tonight. Chance Mock and a couple others have some things they're taking care of tonight. But on Wednesday night, how about this, Catch? J. Brent Cox. Confirmed. Brent Cox on Wednesday night. Longhorn national champion, talking a little baseball with us on Wednesday night. So put that on your calendar for the 9 o'clock hour on Wednesday evening. Thank you for all your support. Everybody have a great rest of your Monday until Wednesday at 4 for the next recruiting hour. He is Jeff Ketchum. I'm Chad Hastings, and this is Orange.